All Things Alice. This podcast will explore the cultural phenomenon of Alice in Wonderland as artistic landmark and global symbol of inspiration and imagination. I'm your host, Frank Beddor, the author of the Looking Glass Wars trilogy. Let's explore, what is it about Alice? Hey everybody, it's another episode of All Things Alice. Welcome to the show. Today I have another very talented artist, Ricky Romero. The two of us have not worked together. Often I've worked with a number of concept artists, but seriously, that needs to change with this guy because he is super talented and he takes us to the dark side of Alice in Wonderland. You can find him online under the moniker Mr. Revenge. That should tell you everything about the tone of his work. So check out his stuff. He's got a bunch of awesome pop culture inspired art. And by the way, don't miss the discount link for his merch in the description below. It's well worth checking out. We're going to be talking about surviving as an artist, the balancing act of creativity and parenthood, and of course, all things Alice. So let's fall down that rabbit hole. Ricky, hey man, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. You?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
I'm excited to have you on the show and, to meet somebody that I've never worked with. I have a lot of guests. I have a lot of guests that I've worked with before, and starting to branch out. And I love the tone of your art, and I referenced it, and you thanked me, and
Oh.
and here we are.
It was an honor, man. I gotta say, seeing you drop that, and then I saw your name, and it sort of rang a bell a little bit, and I was like, wait, I know this name. And then I was like, oh my God, yes. Looking Glass Wars. How
Oh, that's
how
cool.
could I forget?
That's
So yeah, big fan of the books, and
oh.
yeah. So yeah, honor to
Oh,
be on the show,
well,
honestly.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
When did you pick up the books? At what age?
Oh, it was probably my last big physical reading spree, probably around 2000. I don't want to admit around 2008. It's been that long since I've actually been picking up physical books. Yes.
Oh, okay, well, that's okay. We're all transitioning
So,
into this new era, so
but yeah, I did read all three of them. I read the third one right after it came out because, after I'd read the first one, it was like, oh, well, I got to see what happens and then speed through the rest of them.
oh,
And
well, thank you. That's such a nice compliment. It's been a while since 2015 since I wrote a prose book. So to get a little feedback at any time, especially this long after the publication, is very satisfying. So thanks,
yeah,
man.
it's a lot of fun, just really engaging. I remember really liking the stories, and actually the queen that I draw a lot is without a doubt influenced by Red from the books.
Oh well, I'm interested in talking to you about all of that. But you don't do just Alice stuff. You like to take on all things in pop culture, and twist and turn and reinvent them. What are you doing? Attacking all these brands, A Little Mermaid and Alice in
Oh,
Wonderland.
oh.
These iconic. What do you have a beef with this presentation or what?
I don't think it's so much as a beef with them in particular, so much as the creative world that we kind of live in now because of them.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like, as an artist, you kind of feel pigeonholed into doing certain types of art, Marvel, especially
Yeah.
Star Wars. And, I see so many artists and follow so many artists. They're just incredible artists, but they just don't get the recognition they deserve because they aren't really willing to, you know, dip their foot into that pond. They're just like, I don't really want to do superheroes. I don't really want to do that. And I just think it's kind of sad, because when I started drawing, I really had just a lot of original ideas that I really wanted to put through, but everybody just wanted me to draw what they wanted to see
Hmm.
from popular,
Culture.
franchises.
Hmm.
And so I think that was a response to that. It was just kind of like well, I mean, if I'm gonna do it, then I'm just gonna do it in a bit of a punk rock, sassy kind of way, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no real hate for any of them. I love everything that I draw, and everything I draw, I mean, I grew up with. So, I have a lot of respect for them and the artists who do them. But in terms of continuing, it just kind of feels like, man, can we get some new ideas here?
Yeah.
Can we get some new ideas?
Whether you're taking something that's recognizable, you are bringing a fresh voice and look and feel to it. So, I'm a big fan of America McGee, and he started with that whole dark Alice aspect. But when I look at yours, it's framed in horror a bit, but it's so whimsical and it's so optimistic and it's so stylized. I mean, the Mad Hatter with his outfit
Yeah.
is just beautiful.
Well, thank you.
So the horror side of it comes through. And by the way, we're talking about Alice in Wonderland, and a lot of people see it as a whimsical story, but there's a lot
Yes.
of people that see it as as rather more of a horror story with some insanity because of what goes on in the story. So you have lots of perspectives on what Alice means and how it's represented in culture. And I would say that more people are pushing to quote unquote the darker Alice. I can see where somebody might say that about yours, but inside of it, I see a love for the characters and a love for the world. If you were to describe, I would like to go through some of your artwork, but let's just start with the Mad Hatter because he's so iconic. What was going on for you creatively in terms of influences for the art?
So Alice in Wonderland for me, as I approach it again, it's like you were saying, it's whimsical, but it's for me a happy dream that sort of morphs into a nightmare. Looking Glass, same sort of thing, and I really love those books probably more than most other books. The originals, they're just fun to, I mean, even now I put them on when I draw. I'll put on the audiobook and just listen to it, which is what I've been doing with your books too. Just side note, as I've been drawing lately with these new Alice pictures, you know, anything to put me in that world. But the originals, yeah. So when I draw them, I kind of like to draw between the lines, if you will. So everything that I draw regarding Alice isn't specifically written in the book, but it's not written. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like
sure. It's between the
everything's
lines.
allowed as far as Alice is going. Like, so for the Mad Hatter, my most recent picture, I drew him with a bunch of tattoos that are all completely tea themed and the Wonderland themed tattoos. And it works for me as I'm drawing it because in my mind, there's never a passage in the book that says he doesn't have tattoos. And within the confines of history, 18th century or so, yeah, plenty of sailors running around with tattoos. Mad Hatter gets tattoos. End of story. And that's sort of, the creative process for me. And in terms of making them scary and whatnot, I try to sort of merge a little bit of the creepy with a character that you might actually like to meet, but probably not stay around too long, which is kind of how I feel about most of the characters in Wonderland
Right,
anyway.
right, 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 right. Yeah, I mean, these are people with the inability to communicate at times or have reason,
Yes,
and there's rampant, uncontrollable moments for lots of them.
exactly.
So you never know what you might get.
Yes,
Um,
yes. So that's the fun of the story for me is just, putting my own little spin on it. But I like to make sure that if you're pairing the images that I'm doing with the story, you won't look at the image and say, "Hey, well that doesn't happen in the book. That can't happen in the book," because I don't know. I mean, you could go that way. Obviously, incredible stories can be made that way, but when I'm doing it, I like to stay within, like I said, the confines of just the old story.
okay, so you don't feel like you get swept up in other influences from pop culture when you're sketching and starting to fill in, because when I look at his suit with those really sharp lines, and the way that his body, I love the way that his body is swayed, as if the wind is pushing him. In this image that you sent to me, almost looks like he came out of that was part of a prison uniform. Uh, so,
Yeah, it could
the
be.
cigarette, the long cigarette, that seems like a movie star from the 30s.
Yeah, yeah,
So, you definitely are still blending, influences from pop culture that you've seen, because they're right
yeah.
there to
A lot of those images and pop culture things that I do pull for sure are dated.
Yes, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
I live on the TCM channel.
Okay. Okay.
That's
Really?
just my jam. Yeah, I just watch black and white movies nonstop, and
Really? What?
Harry Mason,
Oh,
Twilight Zone. I mean, the old Outer. I love the old black and white movies.
yeah. Wow, that's great. What movie have you watched recently that ignited your imagination a little bit as
Oh,
a
ignited my imagination.
for
Let's see.
work, for work?
Oh, for work?
Yeah, for your art.
Hmm.
Is there anything that you've watched you went, "Oh,
No, I don't really think that watching things influences quite as much as just the nostalgia that I've got implanted in my head. Like a
okay.
lot of the old things I've watched, I've seen a million times already,
Okay.
and I really, it's comfort,
Mm-hmm.
comfort background noise. As far as new things that have inspired me, hmm.
I mean, I loved Perry Mason. That's nostalgic.
Oh,
That was the best. So
the new Perry Mason was really entertaining. It was
was
like
it?
it was like taking an old episode of Perry Mason and stretching it out into a season long series. But I was entertained by it. It kind of threw Perry Mason on his head too. He
Oh,
wasn't.
okay. That's I've been tempted to watch it, and I hadn't talked to anybody about it, and so I needed a little prodding. So
Yeah, I
hopefully,
mean, if
yeah,
you like Perry Mason,
I
yeah,
do. Yeah,
it's an interesting take. He's very much not the Perry Mason you remember, but the stories are still as engaging, I feel,
right.
especially towards the end of every season. But yeah, again, I really enjoy just that old timey feel, and they do a really good job of capturing the time period in that show too. So I'm a sucker for anything from that era.
Okay, so in creating your work, you're thinking about what's in the novel, in the original books from Lewis Carroll. You're also thinking, what's kind of between the lines, and then you have these influences that just find their way into your art, which is why I love the Hatter so much. But I also, the Alice image that you did, she looks like a ballet dancer. She's so elegant, and there's so much motion. And then when you look closely, you see that big knife. Tell me about the composition of that image and what that knife represents, because you also have those cards flying all over and the moon in the back. It's in her hair. I love all of that.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you. That one is that piece in particular just kind of came about. I don't even really know how it sort of came together, but
Mm-hmm.
the violence and stuff that I sort of throw in, the blade is just the Vorpal sword blade. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of a bit of a nod to American McGee because her blade in the game was like a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, that's cool. Okay. That makes sense to me.
yeah, I mean, again, says it's a sword specifically in the book, but I mean, a knife works too. A blade is a blade.
A
Yes,
blade is a
it
blade.
cuts.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I like the image of a knife as opposed to a sword. A sword brings a very medieval type of feel to it, and the knife kind of just feels a little bit crazier. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just grabbed a kitchen knife and now I'm gonna go through Wonderland. As far as the actual composition and everything goes with the cards, I think I was really just feeling at the time like I wanted to draw an Alice that sort of encompassed most of the ideas of Wonderland with, the heart cards and the little caterpillar that she's actually facing. So it sort of takes a bunch of elements from the story and just mixes them all together into one piece. She's really that much bigger than the caterpillar because in my mind she had just eaten a piece of the mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
The cards are flying around sort of as a sign of things to come.
Okay.
just a little bit. She's going to be at the castle. The blade again was really just a nod to the video game because there's no real mention of the blade in the first book. Yeah, I mean, the style and everything else it's kind of an older piece that I did. So I think it was really a time when I was more experimental than I am right now in terms of design, character wise, the pointy feet, the very sort of exaggerated features.
I really love that. So, but that doesn't mean that I don't like love. I don't know what's new or old.
Oh yeah,
But I have the Cheshire Cat hanging upside down. It's blue, holding a cup of tea
yes.
upright, and then I think the scarier card soldier with that face, which is all teeth.
Yeah,
Like I think that's a nod to you know full on horror.
totally. Cheshire Cat's one of my favorites in Alice, without a doubt. He just was always the one to kind of put a smile on my face throughout the books. So confusing, so nonsensical. I mean, him and then without a doubt, probably the Mad Hatter second. But drawing him, I don't know. I had this idea of, he's always depicted as sitting on the tree, but I figured maybe a little bit crazier, maybe
Right?
not just sitting. Now,
Hmm.
let's turn him into a little bit of a monkey. He's hanging now
Hmm.
by his tail, because why not? And then the tea thing, I just thought it was kind of funny. He's going to be holding a saucer of tea and drinking it, but you can't hold it upside down. So I kind of created a little bit of a interesting mix for people who actually notice that detail where he's holding the tea the right side up, but
Yeah.
he's upside down.
Yeah.
But it was a fun piece. And a lot of the things that I do in those pieces that not many people notice these things because especially in this day and age, you're really only seeing these pieces on the phone. But if you look really closely, I always put hidden pictures in everything. The newer ones there that are the bigger ones, I think I labeled those 2023. If you actually zoom in on those and scroll around, you'll just see millions of just little millions, well, dozens, I should say, of little faces just everywhere throughout the picture. And that's something that I've always done. And I think that sort of just dates back to me as a kid loving those Where's Waldo books and the amount
Mm.
of detail they would throw in them and sort of transferring that over to my other art. Just, oh, well, I'm drawing a big picture, but I'm actually going to throw in just a tiny little picture here. We'll see if anybody notices it. Rarely do, but I still do
Well,
it.
it's fun that there's Easter eggs, and the more people that know there's Easter eggs, the more people will go hunting for them. So,
This is true.
um,
This is true.
um, and is there a reason that you use the color blue or bluish gray for? Is it these are just instinctual choices that come up, or
The Cheshire Cat, I think I used the blue just because I think at the time I didn't have any other colors and I was just trying to go for the brightest color I had.
I love that answer. I'm trying to
Yeah.
make this like, did he really think about choices and test it out? He goes, oh, fuck it. No, this is all I got. That's probably the
Yeah, I'm
best
pretty
way.
sure blue was all I had that looked crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I was at the time I was doing those, I was running low on a bunch of different colors. So I was grabbing whatever I could find. I think some of those were even painted with food coloring.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? Food color art, fun.
Well, what was your first introduction to Alice? Reading the books, you said, but how old were you and
Oh,
who
well, the
introduced
first
you?
introduction
Yeah,
was a cartoon for
the
sure.
cartoon. Oh,
I
okay.
mean, to say otherwise, I mean, as somebody born in the 80s would just be untrue.
Yes.
But the first one that actually really resonated with me and stuck in my memory was the 85 TV movie. The
Was that with
with
um
everybody.
everybody was in that. Whoopi Goldberg
Yeah.
was in that, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. Her and her sister. And I remember seeing that. I couldn't have been older than maybe 7 or 8 at the time. And that one just really left an impression on me, you know.
In what way?
I was, I was visiting my cousin at the time when we saw it. So it was just on, I believe they might have had it on tape or something. And it was just so weird. It was just so out there. The songs, the makeup, it, but at the same time, just totally compelling. And I remember even years later, just searching for that movie and I couldn't find it anywhere. It took forever, I think, for that thing to come out on DVD. I could not find that anywhere. And when I finally did, I rewatched it and I remember feeling almost the exact same way I did as a kid watching it, where I'm just
Wow.
like, oh man,
Wow.
this is really weird, but I actually really like this a lot. The
I think that was
songs.
because it was a TV movie.
Mhm.
I think it took a while for it to find its way to DVD. But
Yes, that makes sense.
were there other things in pop culture that have weird, twisted takes on stories or pre-existing ideas that you've been attracted to that that you grew up with?
A lot of them, I want to say really just sort of that I can recall off the top of my head, they all seem to just be Alice in Wonderland themed for some reason, like Night of the Demons, the old 80s horror movie.
Okay.
Alice in Wonderland goes to a haunted house, all the different variations and iterations, different names here and there, even the most recent Korean show, Alice in Borderland.
In
It's
Borderland. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all just it's interesting. I think it's just really interesting how many people decide to use Alice as their source of inspiration. And I feel like that sort of resonates with me a lot too, because I really don't know why it is with Alice, but something about it just is fun.
You and I have the same experience, but I'm wondering if you've noticed when you're working on something in Alice, suddenly it seems to be everywhere. It's everywhere every day anyway. It's like cars.
Oh
You buy
yeah,
a Prius and suddenly everybody seems to have a Prius.
totally.
Or what have you. But the same with Alice. In this last political cycle, I heard through down the rabbit hole, we're through the looking glass.
Oh well,
We're all
yes.
mad here, over and over and over. And I was like, wow, was I not paying attention before?
Yeah, yeah, right. I feel like that sometimes too. Like, is just the world just completely taken with this? I
Yeah,
mean, is this just how we do? We just do Alice references every day now for everything? Cool. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Every time I'm on the internet, everybody's, oh, I just went down a rabbit hole. It's like, oh, well, did you now? Okay.
yeah. Yeah, that's probably the most popular and often used phrase that obviously Lewis Carroll didn't invent rabbit holes, but as a portal to a different place, he certainly did. And so, as you said, not only on the internet, but basically
Yeah,
anywhere.
exactly. Everywhere.
People say it so
Right.
casually, you wonder
Mhm.
if they even know what the source material is.
True,
But
true. I never actually wondered that, but now I'm going to start wondering that. They're going to say that, and I'm going to be like, do you even know what you're saying?
exactly. So, are you also writing? Because you this morning you sent me a poem. Uh,
Oh, yes. That's
yeah.
from The Looking Glass.
Oh,
So there's a
so
portion in that where the White Knight actually sits Alice down and recites this poem about the aged man, or
okay.
Cat's Eyes, I believe is what it's called, to Alice. And it's just a nonsensical poem, of course, but the little last portion of the poem where it specifically references the guy sitting on the fence, I enjoyed that. So I
So
always wanted
you.
to draw
Oh, okay.
it.
Because I just received it this morning, so I was going, hey, what's going on? And then I see the next chapter is right from the books. It's the Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to fully illustrate Alice at some point, and that's kind of what that's leading up to. Like an actual just his literature, just my art.
I think that's a great idea, and you should, put it on Kickstarter and raise a bunch of money, and fans will love it. Will feel fresh, and you're honoring the source material, and you're bringing a new twist to it, which is sort of the whole point of works that are in pop culture is to find a way to make them feel relevant and contemporary in the current zeitgeist of what's going on. And you wouldn't be the first. There are a lot of illustrated books out there.
That's
Um, And do you have any favorites?
Not really in terms of illustration. When it comes to Alice illustrations, I there's a lot that misses the mark for me. And I think a lot of that just has to be because they feel too fluffy, too happy, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not that they're bad pieces of art or anything. I'm not saying that at all. They're great pieces of art, but just it doesn't resonate with me in terms of the Alice in Wonderland world that I sort of feel when I read it. They feel overly happy, or there's a lot of, things that are just very, very completely inspired by one specific source. Looking at you, Disney. Um,
Right.
and the ones that aren't, I feel are definitely interesting. Again, your books, American McGee, those types of things. I like those interesting takes on it, especially yours because you really went into the history and everything and just tied it all together. It was a lot of fun to read. But in general, I feel like a lot of people just can't concentrate on the happiest part of Alice or the dream part where apparently all dreams are good for them, maybe.
Are you a Ralph Steadman fan? Do you know Ralph Steadman?
Yes, yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah, he's great. I
Because
mean,
to me, the Alice piece of art that you did is not dissimilar in terms of the lines. That's one of my favorite illustrated Alice books, and it sort of put him on the map. But when I look at your Alice, the one we were talking about earlier, and then I look at some of Ralph Steadman's, the whimsy that he creates is not dissimilar to stylistically. You have a more of a horror bent to it,
yes.
but there is something that I'm not quite articulating here.
No, no, I
in
got it. High praise indeed. I mean, honestly, Stedman, wow. I appreciate that. Thank you.
but do you see the if you look at the
Oh,
Alice,
I do. I
do you
do. I
see
mean,
why I make that connection?
totally. He's an amazing artist, and I can actually see that. And a lot of, my initial, I'm gonna say training, but it was really just self-taught, was really from a lot of, Disney artists and books and, Stedman absolutely featured in there because again, Wonderland, just love it. The poses and everything else. That's just for me, studying a lot of old Disney animation.
Right, right,
And
right,
that was
right.
really what I wanted to do when I grew up as a kid. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna I'm gonna go to Disney and I'm gonna bring in my ideas and we're gonna make animated movies. And I was hitting high school and then they closed their animation studios and I just floundered. I was
Mm,
like, oh, guess I'm not going to Disney then. Well, now what? And so that's like all of that training I did up until then, just sort of like feeling like that's what I'm gonna do, definitely influenced my line work and how I draw and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people see a lot of different styles in my art. I get so many different artists draw. Your art looks so much like this person's. Your art looks so much like this person's, and it's not really a conscious effort to make it look like any person so much as it's just
yeah,
I sat down and
it's
I drew
yeah, it's
it.
their influences and amalgamation of all sorts of things that have come into your creative consciousness. So, but yeah, the line drawings and the poses, I can see what you're getting at with some of the animated characters because you have that slightly exaggerated proportions to the body, slightly exaggerated stances, which I really love, and I'm looking forward to contrasting. I'll find a Stedman piece and put that up on the interview so folks can
I'd love to see that.
actually
Yeah.
visualize this. But that makes sense to me that some of these people were influences for you. So, how does one become self-taught in drawing? Is it like writing? It's the doing of and trial and error and
I think so. I think at the end of the day, it's just picking up the pencil and doing it, or whatever your medium is. You just have to do it and not let the failure or whatever you can't do in the moment sort of hold you back from what you know that you're capable of doing, you know?
how do you view failure?
Um, I suppose I try not to at all. But failure, I guess, is the idea of sitting down for me personally, artistically speaking, and drawing something to a point where I know it's good, but I'm just unhappy with it. I look at the picture and I just say that's just a fail.
Okay.
And it's kind of depressing in a way
But
because
how does it inform the next piece or the piece after that or the reimagining of it? How does it affect your psyche going, you know, like for
exactly.
instance, I'll just reference myself. So, I'll write something. I'll write a chapter early in a book, and then I'll be midway into the novel, and then I'll go back and say, "Oh, I better polish that chapter." And then I'll read the chapter and go, "Wow, that is terrible. Like, what was I thinking?" And because the one that I just wrote seems so fresh and so fresh, it's new, it's just come off, out of my head. And that one I love. And then I go back and I read that and I go, "Oh God, really? I thought that was pretty good." And then I go back and I rewrite it, and then I start to feel good about it. I go, "Oh, well, I fixed it. It's fresh. That's pretty good." And then I work my way through. And I go back and forth in that process. And then sometimes in the middle of the night, I've said this to other guests, I wake up and I go, "Okay, I came up with a solution. Here's the problem. This doesn't make any sense." So the whole chapter doesn't flow. And then I finally let it go. I'm not going to look at that chapter until my editor looks at it, and then I'll battle out with her what's good or bad. So what's your version of that?
That, it sounds very, very similar to what I do, just reading line work instead of line. So I'll draw a sketch and I'll feel positive about it. And so when I draw, I have this thing that I do, and it's something that I learned from Roald Dahl back in the day. I read a documentary, I saw a documentary about him, and what he used to do was he would write, and then like at the very tip top precipice of his creativity, he would just put it down and walk away. And he said that allowed him to really just sort of flesh it out in his mind because he was just so into it. He couldn't wait to get back to it because, he stopped at the height of his creativity there. So he's really just pouring his mind into that while he's away. And then he comes back and then boom, he writes the rest of his Roald Dahl book
Right.
or however much he's doing. For me, I feel like it's a similar thing. I try to draw, and when I have a scribble or a sketch of an idea I like that I'm really, really enjoying, I won't overwork it and I'll just step away. And if I don't do that, I feel like I end up in that same situation that you were just talking about, where it just kind of haunts me until I can figure out the line work. And I've had pictures where I will go over the line work a dozen times, because it's digital right here. So it's like, oh, no, that's what I want to draw, but that's not the line work I want for it. That's not the look I want. So let's try again. That one's better. Cool, cool. Come back a little later. No, that's not what I want. That's not the line work I'm looking for. Delete and start again. Reference and start again. Reference and start again. Sometimes they never even make it out. I've got just dozens of pictures on here that I just am never going to finish just because it's not a style that I can capture in the moment when I sit down to work on it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But other ones, I come back a year later and I'm like, oh, that's what I was trying to do with that. Well, I'll finish it in 30 minutes
Right.
and I'm happy with it.
How satisfying is that when you can actually
Well,
feel, like happy about finishing it and then it comes really quickly. And I do think that, creating a little bit of space, which is why I often write out of order. I'll have an idea for chapter halfway through a novel and write that and then come back and, slowly work my way through it.
it's the way to
So
do it, apparently, according to Roald Dahl. So,
yeah, well, yeah, the putting it down is really important. I found myself because I've been looking at ways to adapt the Looking Glass Wars into a TV show. And so I have to go back and revisit and then look at the story with logic that suits a different medium. I keep coming up with better ideas that would suit the TV show, but would be great in the book. I'm like, what was I thinking back then? That this is so much better of a solution. It's better backstory. It's more dynamic. It's 10 years past its prime, but I
Yeah.
can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually going to ask you about that, how that feels, having something that you wrote that's so, I mean, great and iconic. Just at this point, years later, you must look back on that and feel like, I mean, obviously proud of it, but you must have some sort of feelings like, oh man, just that one little sentence I would have changed, or what if I would have just changed that tiny bit of a plot? Would I, do you feel that often or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm literally because I'm re-examining and reinventing. So, for instance, there's a gap. There's a logic problem for me, and anybody that knows the book will know. So, Hatter Madigan, he goes on a 13-year search
Mhm.
in terms of finding Alice, and the moment that he finds Alice, he's going into Buckingham Palace and he's jumping off over this wall and he's confronted with a guard and there's a big fight and Hatter leaves unsuccessfully, fulfilling his mission, and goes back to Wonderland to tell everybody that she's alive and she's in this world and we need to go rescue her. And I was trying to, at the time, I thought, well, if Hatter meets Alice, he's going to automatically bring her back, no matter what she wants.
Mhm.
And so I said, I can't have them be confronted. He can't confront her because his duty will overwhelm whatever thoughts she has about it.
Yeah, that
But
makes
then
sense
in the
for
TV
me.
show, when I was developing it, I said that moment of conflict is so important. So how could I resolve that moment of conflict differently? So I wrote the scene that Hatter gets up into her study, and she's there, and she's confronted by this person that looks like the Mad Hatter from the books, which she has pushed out of her mind. So it's one of those crazy obsessive fans. Like, how did you get in here? I'm going to call the guards. You have to get out. And there's this really intense conversation because he's saying, no, I'm here to save you. Don't you remember? And there's this whole thing. And he says, no, your people need you. You have to come back. And she finally uses her own logic. She goes, wait, so I'm your queen. I'm in charge. You have to do as I say. Is that right? I command you to leave.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that works, right?
Right? I mean, what? So is that much more dynamic? How tortured do you think I am that I don't have that scene in the book? And how great that dialogue scene and how much fun that would be, and how conflicted Hatter would be after 13 years of losing his charge and everything he's gone through, everything. And in this moment, nobody believes, she doesn't believe him, as no one's believed her for 13 years.
No,
So that just
that would have been a really, I think that
good
would have been a
scene,
really
right?
cool little bit to read, to be honest. I'm re-listening to them, or listening to them, I should say, for the first time, not rereading, listening to them. And I would really have liked to seen that. I think one part that actually, I don't know, I wouldn't, it's not disappointing, but when he did go back, I kind of felt like, oh, he left without Alice.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I just kind of felt like, oh man.
It wasn't satisfying. It was not satisfying. So, to answer your question, that's just one of like 100 of those problems that I look back on. But on the other hand, as you're creating something, you have it in your mind. And you wonder if it's what you have in your mind is going to translate thematically and the ideas and the feeling. Is the feeling going to translate? Do you find that people, look at a piece of your Alice art and say, hey, this kind of captures what I think of the book? It's not a dream for me, it's more nightmarish. Do you have comments, anything like that?
I get a lot of positive feedback from the Alice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with just how awesome really just the Alice community is in general. I mean, they Alice fans are just going to be Alice fans for everything, it seems, which is cool.
Well, Alice fans love all things Alice,
And that's amazing.
and they keep reinvesting because artists keep reinvesting. For instance, let me tell you a story. Something about one of my publishers. They turned me down, and they say, "Look, you're going to piss off all the Alice fans." And then somebody said, "You're only going to have the Alice fans." And I go, "Only the Alice fans? 150 million books sold? I'll take that." And I didn't agree that fans would be upset. Yeah, a few fans, if a few people like the traditional, but that just meant they didn't know anything about pop culture. They weren't looking anywhere other than, Harry Potter. So,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Too true, too true. Another one of those franchises that just loves to keep on keeping on.
well, to their credit, I mean, things that have stories that have resonance and that people grow up with, they linger as Alice in Wonderland. And so, it's hard to fault Harry Potter for going on when Alice in Wonderland has been going on, even though Lewis Carroll hasn't been carrying the torch. The rest of us have been carrying the torch.
Yeah, I mean that's true too, but I mean I think the bigger difference is just in, the way that you can tell the story. You can't really tell Harry Potter more than a couple different ways.
Well, yeah, I mean, because that's J.K. Rowling's
Exactly, but
and
Alice, you approach it how you want, and chances are you're gonna find somebody who really appreciates the way that you've approached it, probably more than just one
absolutely,
person.
absolutely.
With these other franchises, again, like the newer ones, they're just so people are so defensive about them. That's another thing. People are very, very defensive about them. They don't want them to be messed with in any sort of way. Whereas, by contrast, Alice is just sort of like, oh, well, here's a bunch of paints. Paint it the way you want, you know? The other franchises are like, here's your set color of paints, and you must use these pencils. Please color within the lines. And I think that's sort of the bigger takeaway when it comes to, lingering sorts of characters in terms of, pop culture and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, and also the difference is when things are in the public domain, then you have license to do anything you want.
Yes.
And then inside of a world, like let's just say the Batman world, if you give the reins over to a filmmaker, as they did with the Joker movie, you're going to get something that stands on its own, that's original, and that's quite different. And the more that you try and adhere to the formula, the more the formula dissipates over time and you burn out on it. And then you feel frustrated because the thing that you love so much starts to fade, as in Game of Thrones, which I watched multiple times, but I always stop at, I don't know, season 6 or something, because season 7 and 8 or 8 and 9.
I wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. It was so, it was so frustrating.
It was.
Um,
Oh, wow, was it? Oh, man, I those books were around the same time that I was going through, like I was telling you earlier, my last book reading phase, and your books were a part of that group. And I remember just being, again, the last handful of books that I actually physically read, I was really enjoying. I enjoyed every single one of them. And then the show came on, and I was just ecstatic about it. And man, the first few seasons, I couldn't tell enough people to watch it. And then as the show was closing out, it was like my Game of Thrones just went on mute.
yeah, it completely cratered. But if you read the novels, you really understand why. because the
Yes.
novels are so precise and so set up for episodic for television.
Yes, totally.
And
They're just so expansive. I mean, they're just, I don't even know how you could even fit all of that in television. You know what I mean? Like within a season, I mean, how many hours do you get a season? Not enough.
yeah, but structurally, the books set up in much the same way as the television show. So it was very noticeable when they didn't have a book to finish out, and then it was guesswork, and they didn't have the roadmap. And
Totally.
and so, from that standpoint, what you're talking about, where there's a burnout in franchise creation and exploitation of IPs, I agree. When somebody's a creator and you can give them, sort of license, like Peaky Blinders and Stephen Knight,
Mhm.
that's been going on for years and years, and he does. I believe he writes all the episodes, and there's a tone and a consistency, and and it's stood the test of time, so far.
Well, I think that in the hands of creators, we would honestly probably get much more entertaining products. But the problem is that it's not entirely in the hands of creators at this point.
Yeah.
Like, like even within the realm of Marvel and all that other stuff, if they would just take the reins off, and stop forcing everything to be a certain way. Like, I would love to just have comic book movies made by whatever specific story you want, just standalone. This was a great comic book story. We're going to make this standalone comic book movie. The next comic book movie, if it's going to be one on the same character, doesn't even have to be associated with this one, because that standalone comic story was its own piece of greatness.
Mm-hmm.
But everything just has to be tied in, and it just starts to convolt, especially at a point where, like you were saying, it just starts to, wear on you,
Mm-hmm.
starts to sort of
Yeah.
get old. I mean,
Well.
I've got a Spider-Man tattoo here. Okay.
Uh,
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I feel it.
You're a
I
fan.
love comic books
Yeah.
growing up. And at this point, I fall asleep for comic book movies because there's just so many of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love the new Spider-Man, the animated Spider-Man, that first and second one. But we'll see. We have James Gunn is running DC now, so we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, indeed. Yes, exactly.
Hey, by the way, what's the comic book on the wall behind you?
Yeah, so these are just little Tokidoki things. I don't know if you're familiar with Tokidoki. It's like
Uh,
a
I'm not.
cute little fancy
Oh,
kid cuteness type
oh,
thing.
cool.
But if you combine that cuteness with, the stuff like this, that's my art.
Okay, okay, okay. You have your inspiration right behind you.
There you go.
The
Yeah, you take the extra cute and you take the extra scary and you push them all together, and that's my drawing.
well, do you have kids?
I do. I have twin daughters, actually. They are 16 and they are itching to do movies. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with that.
And when they say they're itching to do movies, in what capacity?
Any capacity. They just want to head down south and find their fortune, so to speak.
Okay, so where are you right now?
California, California. We're up by Sacramento.
Sacramento, and they want to come down to LA.
Yes, yes.
Well,
That
were
is a
they actresses? Are they artists? Draw? Do they draw?
and they want to do acting, of course,
Okay,
modeling, acting. That's
okay,
their jam. They've got the whole little extra twinning thing going on. They're
okay,
those twins that just never stop dressing the same.
okay. Did tell me about how they feel about your art. Have you ever used them as inspiration in art?
Totally.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. They are actually sort of my models for my Alice character. I
Oh,
use profiles, I use their hairstyles. Anytime I need any sort of a reference pose featuring any sort of a female character, just, hey, come over here.
put
Okay,
the kids to work.
exactly. Just a quick photo. All right, cool. Thank you.
And as 16-year-olds, how much are they listening to you these days?
Ooh, well, no, they're good kids. They're good kids.
Yeah.
I think that every parent feels like the strain of teenagers without a doubt,
Oh,
but
for
you kind of
sure.
just have to look outside of the family to see how good your own kids are.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
If that's the case for you in particular or anybody else with kids or teenagers, I kind of just I look at what other teenagers are going through and other teenage parents, and I just makes me feel like, okay, yeah, I'm not doing so bad. This is great. Good to
Well,
go.
I bring it up because I have a 15-year-old daughter and a
Oh,
17-year-old son. And my 15-year-old daughter, I recently said, "Hey, can you explain to me like how I can get on TikTok and how I could put a video?" And she goes, "Oh God, Dad, don't do it, don't do it." And I go, "No, really." She goes, "Okay, I'll help you. Let's film a TikTok together." And I said, "Well, let me like navigate the phone." She goes, "No, just give me the phone. Let me just." So she hooked me up on TikTok. I did one video, and she goes, "Dad, one video? That's you're too old, Dad." So, I like sharing some of the stories or showing some of the art, and I get my 10 seconds of attention, like, "Oh, that's cool." Moving on, but
yeah, that's how it works.
to your point, though, it's if you're present, sharing the creative process, engaging them in, having a career that's enjoyable, like that doesn't feel like work, is
All you can do is support them.
soup. You try and support that, right? And
Yeah.
and also, show them the path to, there's a path to, doing things you love, but you're going to fail along the way, and it's how you respond to that failure, and
Exactly.
that's sort of the critical lesson. I'll support anything you do, but some choices I may give you a heads up why that's might not be the best thing. But if you have a love for it and you want to pursue it, just know if it doesn't work out, another door is going to open up for you to something that will probably be better suited and equally enjoyable.
Absolutely. That's life,
Yeah.
you know,
So
and that's all we can do as parents is just be supportive. Just say, hey, as long as you're not hurting yourself out there,
yeah,
I'll do
yeah,
whatever I can to help you.
yeah, exactly. Let me just go back because we're talking about careers and our kids. Just give me a little heads up about what you were thinking with your. You wanted to be in animation. You were thinking about Disney.
Yes.
There's a lot of other animated companies. Did you pursue that, and then you landed on this art? And
So
and then lastly, is this art a career that's sustainable? Is it something that you do with some other job?
in terms of the Disney thing, I started family early, so no.
Oh,
After
okay.
after I had the girls,
How old were you when you had the girls?
early 20s,
Okay.
22, 23, 22 actually, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
22. So yeah, it was just sort of concentrate on the family after that. I always did want to try and get out there, do something else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I After the whole animation thing when I thought maybe I want to direct movies. That would be kind of fun. And then you look into directing, you're like, well, that costs a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Let's try next. Okay, what about this? Okay, well, maybe that could be fun too. But I think ultimately it was just sort of, well, do I really have time to spend away doing this sort of thing when you haven't really achieved it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No.
you can't start a family and then just run out and attempt to
No.
achieve stuff. It doesn't make it easy.
No. Not at 22. Not at 22. That's a complicated time to be pursuing a career because basically your entire 20s would be experimenting to figure out where you're going to land so that you can do the thing you've explored in your 20s during your 30s, especially if it has to do with entertainment because it's so all consuming. So, for instance, for me, I was much older when I had kids. And then when I had kids, I realized, wow, I don't have nearly as much time to write. So I have to decide to write late at night as opposed to, all day.
Yeah.
But at 22, you got to make some even more definitive choices. And, having two beautiful girls, that they're telling you what choice you have every day.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, I did the family man thing. I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
But in the time that I was doing that, I worked on my art on the side. Again, it was floundering. That's the best description for it. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do for a long time. I felt like, I don't want to just draw because, I don't want to be a starving artist. That's not fun.
Yeah.
But, you know,
How did you solve that?
I became a starving artist, and then I just worked through that.
I don't want to be a starving artist, but you know what? It's okay. I'm going to be a
That's fine.
starving
All right, we'll
artist.
just do this. We'll
Yeah.
just do this. So I just powered through, and I got a little bit of a following. I'm still mystified as to how I ended up with as many people who enjoy my art as they do. I appreciate the hell out of it. So cool, but dumbfounded as to how it happened.
Baby, it's talent. I mean, talent always finds its way to the top. People feel it. They just intuit it, and that's why I reached out to you. And I'm excited to share your art with my audience. So, what are you working on now? What can we look forward to?
Working on the Alice pictures again, it's going to be a slow process because every single one of these Alice pictures that I'm doing, it's a poster size.
Okay.
So they are literally 20 something by 20 something inches that I'm working on. So they take up a good portion of the wall, and drawing those digitally allows you to zoom into, millimeter sized areas if I wanted to throw in that detail, which I occasionally do.
Okay.
So that's going to take me the better part of the year, I think, to finally get those out. And I estimate that for the first book, it would take me about 60 to 80 pictures to fully illustrate it to a point where I would be happy with it.
Okay.
And that's not including looking back at the earlier pictures and reworking them.
Exactly, as we discussed, which is so. And what's your plan to have it published?
The published thing, I believe there are a couple of publishers that allow you to publish through them. Dark Horse was one of them that you can just sell straight off their site, and they will take care of the publishing and all that kind of stuff. Kickstarter was an option. I haven't really thought so far ahead as to that because I don't really know what I'm going to do after I have all of the pictures.
Well,
Again, I'm sort of enjoying drawing.
once you have them all together and you're weighing your options of how to publish, who to talk to, whether it's Kickstarter or a Mad Image or Dark Horse or Amazon, reach out to me and let's talk about it.
Will,
And
I mean, are you kidding me?
yeah,
Totally.
okay,
First on the contact list.
okay,
Um,
okay.
I want a question for you though about your books. Have you ever looked into having them done in like an animated style?
I've looked at every conceivable iteration. I've looked at doing it as a musical, as an animated show.
Yeah, I'm just curious because as I'm listening to it again, drawing here, the whole time I'm just like, it's a revisit. Last time I read it was more than a decade ago. So as I'm listening to all these action sequences and everything again, the whole thing that's just sort of spinning through my mind is just like, wow, it's like could be like a Studio Ghibli show,
Yes,
movie,
yes,
you know,
yes.
like it would be so cool.
Well, Gerard Doyle, who is the man who reads the book, is so good that even when I listen to it, I think, I wonder who wrote that. That's amazing.
Who
That
did that?
guy's
Yeah.
what? That guy is. He really brings it to life, and you do experience the visceral aspect of what it could be cinematically because he has a
Definitely.
very cinematic voice and he changes his voice and he changes for characters and their sound effects and
That's
he's
my favorite part, not gonna
he
lie.
he's terrific. So kudos to him for making the audiobook pop. I've actually been trying to get Scholastic to republish it because they stopped publishing it, and so they said they were going to put out a new edition. So we'll
Oh,
see.
wow.
Because I think people that have listened to it have loved the Gerard Doyle's voice and
Oh yeah, it's
reading of the book, right?
mhm. Totally, yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. I mean, and it's really a different experience than just reading it. It brings like a whole new set of ideas in a sense into my
Yeah.
brain.
Oh, good. Well,
Reading it is just sort of like, I'm making it up as I go along. And a lot of it is really just sort of, okay, we'll pull a little of this and a little bit of that. And, I know that that's sort of what Alice is supposed to look like. And that's kind of like what the Queen could sound like. But then when you hear somebody else read it, it's almost like, you know, having somebody read you a bedtime story. So you can just sit there and drift off and let your imagination just go to work over everything that's being read to you. It's kind of like being in school again, after break, and while the teacher would sit there and read you a story and you had quiet time for 30 minutes.
I have two last questions, and you brought up imagination, and I want to know from you how imagination, the power of imagination in your work, because in my novels, as you know, imagination is a real power source, and so I often like to look at quotes of interesting creators or thinkers of philosophers about the idea of imagination in our place. Like, Albert Einstein said, I think imagination is more powerful than knowledge, which is so interesting because you need both, but you need that spark. And when you think about imagination, what do you think about?
I think about imagination. I suppose really imagination for me is just anything that is just so outside of the normal that it seems crazy. That's
Okay,
imagination for me. Like,
right.
I don't really imagine, oh, mundane life, day to day. That's not imagination. Imagination is when you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, hey, look, there's a bird, but what if that bird, I don't know, all of a sudden transformed into something crazy, the human with a bird head and then just started running, you know, that's the type of imagination that I enjoy. It's a very surreal type of imagination. It could be David Lynch is one of my favorite directors.
Okay, okay.
Got that sort of
Yeah.
very weird kind of scene to scene, like, oh wow, what's going on? And then he zooms in on an
Dirt.
insect eating something,
Yeah.
and then you know what I
Yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a very weird juxtaposition of just, oh well, here's something really imaginative and here's something very real, and now they're going to clash, and I'm going to show them to you very vividly.
Cool. I get
So
that. I get that. So
imagination.
David Lynch is that's not I guess in thinking about that, that makes sense that he's an influence.
Yeah, totally, totally, without a doubt. I've
Okay,
always liked
so
it.
my last question, and I had meant to ask you earlier because you said that your Queen Red character there was some of my Queen Red character
Mhm.
influence. And when you say that, do you mean from the book or from the concept art that was on the cover?
From the book.
From the book. So
Yes.
explain what.
So when I think of your red, the two phrases from the first book that really stick out in my mind is the matted hair,
Hmm.
her overall personality. But the matted hair is the one thing that sort of, because I think up until that point, as I was listening, I kind of always envisioned her as like almost like Charlize Theron from
Yeah.
the Snow White movies,
Yes. Uh-huh.
But the matted hair and then the blackened teeth really just sort of like the chef's kiss of evil on
Oh,
it.
that's a nice phrase. That's a very
It
nice
was like,
phrase.
oh, okay, so she's like not traditionally pretty, but she's like, I like this. I like this. I like this depiction. I think I like the way this is going. And another thing that has to do with that too is that the queen in general, I think everybody just really envisions as the Disney queen, the large, overweight, very boisterous kind of, I don't know,
Hmm.
unattractive type queen, I guess you
Yes.
could say.
Yep.
And so whenever I see different versions of the queen, I'm always intrigued by how whoever is interpreting them decides to go about and do that. And I think that your interpretation was just really, for the time that I read it, so far outside of what I'd typically seen her depicted as. You know what I mean? She's either just incredibly normal or incredibly unattractive and like mean, and then your version came along and I kind of felt like, oh wow, she's like actually freaking evil. She's actually like scary mean. Like I never felt scary mean from the Queen before, but in your version, they're scary mean.
Okay, yeah, and I can see that connection in your artwork, but I can also see why my concept art didn't speak to that because there was that rub between that blackened teeth and that hair and how attractive or not attractive should she be in the concept art because I was thinking about it from a cinematic standpoint
Mhm.
and because
Makes
I
sense.
work in movies and and Charlize Theron was she's a particular kind of model for the movie version and the concept artist that I worked with who did the cover art for Seeing Red did a number of iterations, and the darker ones were rejected by my publisher, and so we ended up with the version that's on there on the cover now, which is, we had to take into consider their notes.
Mhm.
But I was always a little bit conflicted about the way that I described her in the book with her teeth and versus was I really going to show that off on the cover and I suppose I still haven't sorted that out.
I think it's a great. I mean, I've got my own personal horror style, but I think it's a great depiction.
Okay.
I feel like it's a truly evil queen.
Okay.
It doesn't make you question whether or
Yeah.
not she's evil or maybe just being annoying and angry.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
that's the feeling I get from a lot of different interpretations of the queen is that they're just angry. You know. One more question about your queen though. In terms of look, what outside of like the sharpened teeth and the matted hair, what did you envision her as? Like the voice that's being, on the audiobook is again very much reminiscent of like the Queen from Disney,
Yeah.
the
Well,
pitch of voice.
it,
But visually, as you were writing her, how did you envision her?
that mame of hair, that red hair, and then it was the dress. I focused a lot on. I had a I had a little fantasy and driving in traffic, and somebody cut me off, and I was thinking like, oh, I'd really like to do something. I'd really like to reach out and do something to that person, and they're driving and disrupt their whole thing. It's just like having this, and I thought, like if I was like a thorny rose bush, I would just reach over and just entwine their whole car and find my way into the cracks of the window. And so when I went home, I started thinking, oh, Red should have a dress that comes to life that can do that, that can reach out and kill some servant of anybody that she feels is not servicing her in the way that she should be taken care of.
This is also another awesome thing about her. I did love the thorns and cussing,
Oh,
sorry,
you can
the
cuss.
thorns and
Doesn't
everything
matter.
else. But yeah, just great. Just again, her whole evilness depicted in the book is just
Well, after seeing your artwork, it doesn't surprise me that you landed on Queen Red as an influence, and that we're having a longer chat on Red. So we'll share some of those images and that kind of like-minded spirit around the villains. I appreciate chatting with you and. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you and learning about your process and you kind of drilling down on your art. So thanks for taking the time to be on the All Things Alice show. So you have Instagram, you're on Threads. Hey, what's up with your nickname, Mr. Revenge? Where did that come from?
Mr. Revenge was back when I signed up for social media. I was rather clueless and I did not know that that was what people were going to be seeing. I just thought it was like my video game name. That was a
Uh,
game I used when I played video games. And so I put it there. And then all of a sudden my friend said, "Hey, Mr. Revenge, huh?" And I was like, "Yes." And it stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, your kids weren't old enough to help you, work your way through the social media landscape.
Sadly,
So,
no.
yeah,
Sadly, no.
yeah.
But yeah, so Mystery Revenge on Instagram, and the website is Mystery Revenge as well. I mean, apparently that's just who I am now.
And people can buy your artwork on your website?
On on both of my Instagram and my website, yes. And
Okay.
I currently have a handful of just, limited poster Alice prints up there.
Yep.
And yeah, signing up for the newsletter will get you more info and sketches and all sorts of other stuff
And
on
if
the
and if
upcoming
somebody
comics.
listened to this podcast and came to your website, would you consider giving them little discount or something like
Absolutely.
that?
Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
Heck
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I'll
Well,
figure that out today. I know there's a way to put on the discount codes, but I'll come up with a little
okay.
fun tag that they can enter in to get
Okay,
the
great.
discount.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
we'll add all that to this and to the interview.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you
Okay.
so much. It was really great meeting you.
Yeah, same man. All right, take care. Be in
All right,
touch.
you take care too.
Later.